Welcome everyone for joining. I'm really excited to have you all join this session. I'm Connor. I'm Smartling's manager of US customer success here, and I'm really excited to have Michelle Kerr from IHG here. Michelle is IHG's director of product transformation for digital and direct channels. So great to have you, Michelle.
Thank you, Connor. I'm excited to be here. For those who may not be familiar with IHG, we're a global company with 20 hotel brands, including well-known names like Intercontinental Hotels and Resorts, Kimpton Hotels and Resorts, and Holiday Inn. With more than 6,600 hotels in more than 100 countries, we are committed to enhancing the guest experience worldwide, and our guest list is extensive. The IHG One Rewards program is one of the largest hotel loyalty programs with more than 145 million members.
Awesome. Yeah, and it's great to have you here. I've worked with IHG for a while now, almost 6 years, and I think we've worked together for about 3 years or so now.
Yep.
So we've done a lot in that time, and I think one of the major focuses for today's call is really talking about how you've translated IHG.com using Smartling's platform and services. So I guess the first question is, what was really the goal for IHG to translate IHG.com? And to kind of add on to that, why would you recommend having other customers translate their website? What's the benefit of translating a global website?
It's a great question. So for IHG being a global brand, we have guests that shop globally, right? So for example, I sit here in America, but I could be shopping for a hotel in France. If that hotel in France only puts their content in French, I'm not able to understand it. But actually, that's not normally the problem. The problem is the reverse. I'm sitting in France and I'm looking to, book a hotel here in America and the content's all in English. If I don't speak English, it's a terrible experience on the website. So by translating the site and eliminating the English bleed through, we're able to meet the guest's needs in a more effective way and help them as they make a purchasing decision.
Yeah, and one of the biggest challenges with translating a multilingual website at scale is what we refer to as English bleed through. And what English bleed through is where there's maybe portions of a page or portions of the site that are partially translated, but that have English start to appear. And that could be because of updates to source copy. It could be because of portions of the site that we haven't yet captured for translation. And that ends up being a poor end user experience. They're going to the site, they're navigating through it in their native language, and then maybe there's a critical part of the site that they need to kind of better understand. And because it's in English, they can't figure out how to move forward with whatever the task is or whatever it is that they're trying to do on the site. In this case, potentially booking a hotel room, trying to understand, details of a particular property or of a particular hotel brand. So that was one of the major challenges we encountered is, how do we tackle bleed through? How do we identify it? And then how do we sort of translate it at scale so that you're translating all of the bleed through, we're finding it all, and making sure that it can be QA'd and, verified as being, a fully translated end user experience.
Yes, absolutely.
I think one of the other major goals is to also not just, increase bookings, but to also entice other hotels to become franchisees at IHG, correct? And so one of the first things they may do is look at IHG's site for their region or their, the language market and look to see like what is the user experience there. Is that correct?
Correct. As a hotelier is choosing to come on board with IHG, they'll shop the product. And if they go through the booking flow and they see content that's both a mix of English and let's say another language, it's not a great experience for them. And it doesn't show a lot of confidence that IHG is going to serve their needs.
Got it. Okay, that's great. And then, you've obviously been going through this effort of translating IHG.com for a few years now. It's a massive site. There's a lot that goes into it. What are some of the common challenges that you think any customer that's looking to translate their website at scale will encounter? And I guess we'll kind of dive into how we approach each of those challenges.
So for us, we had three areas that we really focused on. We wanted to minimize manual effort. Small tasks add up over time. And we also found that when new team members were onboarding, they were forgetting some of those tasks, including click the translate button, which resulted in more English bleed through. So by automating a lot of those workflows, we were able to simplify that experience. We also needed to free up our technical resources to manage the forward development and not manage our international sites. So we needed a solution that the business could manage and didn't require technical involvement. And then lastly, we need a solution that was cost cost neutral, not cost neutral, but actually saved us money because translations can be expensive, especially when you're using a human to translate them. So we needed a cost-effective solution that worked for IHG.
Yeah. And so maybe we can dive into each of these. It sounded like the first one is really reducing sort of the manual effort that goes into translating the site. And when IHG was first starting to use SmartLink, it was very much like you said, a manual effort of someone having to go in and click a translation button and request each page and request each language. And I think one of the things we've really been able to kind of work through is use what we call jobs automation. So what that is for anyone that's not familiar is basically defining a set of rules in SmartLink that say we want to translate X pages of the site into X languages, and we can automate that using a set of rules that will just seamlessly translate everything on a regular basis. How have you found that to be beneficial to IHG?
It's been huge because we are able to set up the rules in a way that allows us to treat different types of content differently. So, for example, hotel content might go through machine translations with no validation. In China, we run a process where there's always validation at the end. If we have bits and pieces of content that need to go through human translations, we're allowed to slice and dice those rules as we need. So it's not a one size fits all strategy. It's really bespoke and custom to our unique content needs, which makes it incredibly impactful and has freed up a lot of time for our team.
Yeah, that's great. And that's one of the tools that's part of our global delivery network, our proxy solution, which is what one of the solutions that IHG is using to translate the website. I think one of the other key things that we found when working through this is that you actually had portions of the site translated already, and that was actually
Mhm.
getting ingested. So like non-English content, previously translated, French, German, Italian, Spanish, whatever, was getting pulled in. And I think one of the things that we had to work through and we found a good strategy for was setting up filtering. And so we have some automated filtering that we put in place with IHG that detects only English, sends that through for translation, and then filters out non-English. And I think that's also a key aspect for customers to be aware of is that, understanding that maybe you don't need your site fully in English to start translating with SmartLink. It's okay to have a mixed user experience to get started with.
Yeah, and that was really important for us because some hotels did have their content translated and we wanted to honor those translations. We didn't want to inadvertently override them. And so for us, it was great that we were able to keep the content that was already translated in its original form while still identifying that English bleed through and translating it on the fly.
Got it. And then kind of moving on to the next topic, what were some of the important considerations or requirements for your website translation solution?
So for us, we needed real-time translation updates and we needed them to happen pretty fast. We also needed a way for our hoteliers and our corporate staff to be able to provide feedback and get changes made really quickly. And then one big area for us that was important was legal compliance. In China, there are certain phrases you cannot use, and so we needed a system that could replace those with approved terms. And that was a huge win that SmartLane was able to implement that for us.
Yeah, great. Let's touch on each of those. So, I think one of the key benefits of the global delivery network and the reason that you guys have been leveraging that so heavily for the site translation is those real-time translation updates. So using other CMS platforms, there is sort of a process where you like translate to staging and then you've got to cut over, and that can take time. There's a bit of a lag time from getting your translations, in place and live on the site. But the need to do real-time translation updates is really a benefit of the GDN. We have it configured so that and again, we can define this at a URL level, at a individual sort of site level. But as a translation is completed, it can actually go live in production right on your site really quickly. And so I think that's been a huge benefit to you guys being able to just do that, get it live, being able to QA it right then and there, and make
Mhm.
the appropriate edits as needed.
Yeah, it's been great. The teams have been really happy with it.
Yeah. And then you were talking to about like the job automation, the benefit of being able to choose your translation method. We sort of call that like a translation mix or an optimized mix of translations. Maybe we can touch on a couple of the different methods that you guys have used. I think there is still an element of full human translation that you guys started out with, and we've sort of started to shift away from that as a lot of the industry has. The localization industry is shifting more to a machine translation method so that you guys could translate at scale. And you touched on this in a more cost affordable way.
Mhm.
How have you seen the MT benefit, being able to translate at the scale of the IHG sites?
It's been huge. I mean, the amount of savings that we've had, we would have never been able to afford to translate our entire site the way that we have now. I mean, it's been in the millions of dollars that we've saved. I think that, I was thinking as you were asking this question, the better answer is what kind of translation have we not used? Because we really used them all at this point. So we are still in a hybrid solution. We have a little bit of human translations. We have some of the IHT that SmartLane offers, which has been a great solution for some of our forward development teams, and then we use machine translations for a lot of our hotel content. And so we just find the right mix and have just worked really closely with your team to make sure that we're getting the right content into those right cues, as I think of them for translations.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, and you have started to adopt the AIHT a little bit, which is sort of our AI human hybrid solution, which gives you sort of a better quality output than you may get with the raw machine translation. And you touched on the brand compliance as well and legal requirements, and that's a key part of this process as well. IHG is very specific, like you said, especially Greater China, very specific brand and what we would call glossary term compliance. And we've been able to really build that into the process and work closely with you guys to understand like what are your specific product terminology, loyalty program terminology, and what scenarios do we translate like a hotel name or not translate a
Mhm.
hotel name. So we've been able to really work with you guys to clearly define what those requirements are and really build that into the process and automate that. Because again, trying to do that at the scale that we're talking about. And speaking to the scale, I think we've translated like almost 600 million words to date of
Yeah,
content.
it's a lot. It's a
So it's a lot.
ton.
So trying to manage that manually is really difficult. And I think that goes for any customer that's translating, a really large set of site content is getting these automation rules in place, getting your brand compliance rules mapped out in advance and figuring out how best to implement that across the site so you're not having to kind of piecemeal it as you go.
Yeah, and I think there's going to be pivots with all of this, but one of the things that's been really great is that our machine translations are trained. So we worked with you guys to train it on our glossary and our previous translations history so that it's not translating Turkey as a bird, but probably as a country, because that's how hospitality thinks of Turkey, right? And so it understands IHG, it understands IHG brands and kind of our nuances, and that has made the quality of the translations um, so much better to the point that our brand teams are willing to accept it. Because that's always a fear when you move into machine translations is this going to be actually end up being a negative customer experience? And for us so far, it has not been.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point. The goal here was not just to simply get the translations out there broadly across the site and fill in the bleed through. It's to get it at a point that it's brand specific, it's readable, it's the tone of voice that you're trying to speak to for your audience and for each sort of target market. And the training has been really a great way to do that. And so for the audience, what we've done is we've taken, IHG's linguistic assets, as we call it, their translation memory, their term base that's in the glossary, and we fed that into Google's AutoML engine to train it so that the MT output is really IHG specific as an organization and really, kind of inherits the brand terminology, the tone of voice. And that's really improved the output. And it's been great to kind of iterate on that as time goes on, getting feedback on what we need to change. And I think that's an important part of this process that for just really any of the topics we've talked about is iteration. Like we didn't figure this all out in one kind of fell swoop. We've worked very collaboratively together to figure out like what's working, what needs to be improved, and figuring out like what are the next steps to get it to a better place.
Yeah, and I think as we talk about like feedback and that feedback loop, it's also important to mention our partnership with Managed Services
Right.
because we needed that ability to manage translations on the fly. So we set up a system where our hoteliers, our corporate colleagues can log into ServiceNow, which is IHG's internal ticketing software, and say they have a translations update, whether that's English bleed through or an incorrect translation. That is sent over to the SmartLane Managed Services team, and they're able to implement that change in real time. And we've had changes go live in as quickly as 30 minutes from the defect being identified. So that also provides peace of mind for our leadership team, knowing that we can make those changes relatively quickly.
Yeah, and that's been a great part of the efficiency that we've implemented together is, when we first started out in this website translation process, we get a lot of feedback from stakeholders, regional stakeholders,
Mhm.
spoke the native language about, hey, this translation is missing, or hey, we'd like to see this translation changed. And, again, when we're talking about the scale of IHG's website, that became really hard to manage. And so we've mapped out a really good, clean process between, your teams and your sort of end users that are looking at the content and giving that feedback. And then our managed services team being able to receive those tickets and really implement it in a centralized, easily managed way that, can really quickly turn around the updates that need to be done. And we can tackle any kind of remaining bleed through or make translation updates or edits as needed. So yeah, it's been a really great process.
Yeah, agreed.
And then I think some of the other topics we wanted to talk about were just some recommendations really for anyone else that's looking to, translate their websites at scale. There are some common nuances that I think we've encountered that have been a challenge that we hadn't foreseen at first. So I think like we were talking about like nuances of translation types is that we talk about the machine translation. We've really been able to improve it through the Google AutoML, but at the end of the day, it is still machine translation, and it doesn't always have that sort of context of what something should be interpreted as. I think a common one that we've seen is like how to handle room and bed names is a
Yep.
common challenge. And I think the way to think about this is if you've got a long form of text, the MT can look at all of the text and kind of interpret, okay, this is what it means in, the broader sense of this sentence. But for a lot of your content, especially content that is, someone going through a booking flow and they're making selections about, what kind of room I want, what kind of bed I want, it's little short snippets of text. And so I think one is like one queen premium was an example that came up as, I think you or I would see that as, oh, one queen premium on a hotel website very clearly means a bed and,
Yep.
premium room. But the MT translation didn't have that sort of context. So I don't know if you have any takeaways or kind of learnings for someone that is kind of approaching this about how they should think about this when doing machine translation. Because I think in this scenario, what happened was Queen was interpreted as royalty versus
Yes.
a bed. And so we've got that feedback from users that, hey, like this doesn't read well or this doesn't make sense because it's speaking about Queen as royalty in that sense.
Yeah, and obviously the end user was able to figure out that we probably weren't selling, the queen on
Right.
the site, but it's still not a great experience. And so what we've learned is that you have to just kind of continuously audit the site and then think about creative ways to fix where you have gaps. So what we did in that particular example is worked with your team to retranslate those phrases as though the word bed was included. And so then we just overrode that in the translation's memory. So now every time SmartLane sees one queen, it knows to add the context of bed, regardless of how we phrase it, which then became a universal solution that kind of flows throughout the ecosystem. We don't have to worry about those issues happening again. I think making sure that your leadership knows that it's not going to be perfect out of the gate is really important. This is an evolving process. It's something new. We're going to need to make pivots and you're going to need to change the strategy as you find these things. That's been really critical for us is that our leadership understood that it was new and something we were testing and that they gave us that flexibility and that space to make those changes and we just keep them updated when we run into hiccups. I would also say, making sure that you don't underestimate the volume of content on your site, especially if you have a high rate of change. Like we have hotels going in on a daily basis and editing their content to better market themselves, and that creates a lot of translations for us. And so you might know the volume of content on your site, but you actually don't. And so be
Right.
prepared to kind of adjust based on that. We've made some changes on the fly. Connor and his team have been great at helping us start, stop, discontinue different translations just as we figure out our strategy and our go forward path. That's been really important for us is to be flexible in that area.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I think it's hard. Like, I think a lot of customers have an idea of what they think is the word count or the scope of their website. But what you're not thinking about, especially in the sense of the global delivery network, one of the key benefits of the global delivery network is that it can identify and pick up source copy changes on the fly, ingest it, and quickly translate it. But that's something that's important to keep in mind. Like your word count is not always static and it's dynamically changing all the time, especially if there's a lot of copy updates. And so that's something that's definitely important to be aware of when you're thinking about what is the volume that we're going to have to translate? Sure, we know the word count now, but how often are changes happening to that source copy? Are there areas where maybe we don't want to as quickly ingest those changes? We want to kind of do it on a recurring basis. We want to
Mhm.
review what those changes are and decide when to implement that for translation. So that is a really important consideration. I think that's something that we found while we were working together on this is, yeah, a lot of hoteliers, a lot of users are going in and, making the changes as they see fit for their region, for their properties. And then we were, picking up those changes. And so we have really done a lot of work to kind of figure out like what is the path forward to manage that, in what areas do we want to quickly inherit those changes and translate them versus let's pause and think about like, do we want to translate this? Do we want to sort of let them override translations as needed? So that has been an ongoing process, and I think we've gotten a pretty good handle on it. But that's, I think, for again anyone that's watching this and thinking about how to translate a website, think about that. Like, what are the kind of changes that you are making to your English source copy? How often is that
Mhm.
happening? What kind of autonomy do end users have to make those changes versus having that like kind of funneled through some sort of like overview over when those changes are happening and how those are getting pushed live to the website. Um, yeah, so I think that just to kind of summarize, there's a lot of work we've done together, and we've gotten to a great place. Like I said, we've translated almost 600 million words across the site, and to think that that was all English at one time is kind of mind-boggling. That we've gotten to this point where we've translated, I think it's what 20 hotel-ready languages that.
Yep.
Yeah, so 20 languages, 20 language markets globally, and with so many properties, we really tackled this on a monumental scale. And a lot of the key ways we've done that is leveraging the global delivery network, which is just the proxy solution to be able to easily spin up and host translated versions of IHG site. Automated ingestion and automated packaging of content using jobs automation to be able to really remove the manual effort of having to, go in and select what you want and translate it, which can become really tedious and time consuming. Leveraging machine translation to drive down costs and be able to translate on a massive scale without constant human intervention, but also I think using that translation mix, like where needed, leveraging humans, leveraging AI to get a better quality output where you need to. Um, and then, being able to leverage other resources like managed services to help, get the feedback loop implemented properly so
Mhm.
it's not entirely on IHG resources to kind of manage that end to end.
Yeah, and I would say if I were to add like just one more like tidbit of advice, I would use the resources available to you because we often came in with ideas about how we should do something, but through later conversation and poking, we realized there was probably a totally different and better way to do it. And so having that partnership and that open dialogue between our teams, I think has been incredibly helpful as we as we go down this path. Um, I joke with people that the SmartLane team's almost a part of the IHG team, just as much as my
Feels
own
that
team
way.
members in it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree 100%. I think that's one of the key part is really like collaborate closely,
Mhm.
between the partnership, like the vendor and the team. Like, if you had put it all on us, we wouldn't have gotten the information and the inputs that we need from you guys to do this effectively. Like, what are your brand requirements?
Yep.
What is the content that needs a higher quality translation output? What sites maybe are in scope, are not in scope. So it really is a collaborative team effort on both sides, and the partnership is really what makes this successful. Is you relying on our knowledge, our services, our experience, and us really relying on you guys to figure out like what is the voice of IHG, what is the scope of work, how do we best implement this based on your requirements. So I think that has been like the most critical part about this is that constant collaboration, constant feedback between each other, figuring out how best to improve the process.
For sure.
Yeah,
I'm
awesome.
excited to see what we do next, Connor.
I know, I know. There's more to come. It's a constantly changing landscape with you guys, and I'm sure we've got new brands coming, new
Yep.
regions coming. I'm sure at some point new language markets coming. So yeah, excited to continue collaborating with you. It's been a great experience so far, and excited to see what's to come on the horizon.
Likewise.
Great.
Thank you for inviting me today.
Thank you for coming. Always great working with you. So thanks so much, Michelle, and thank you for everyone else that joined today's session.